Hello, so I asked you for some Q&A questions and book recommendation questions over on Instagram and on my community tab, and today I'm going to answer those for you. The first one is for hug books, because this person has many hospital tests and MRI on Friday. This is going up on Friday, so hopefully those went well for you. For hug books, I would recommend Still Life by Sarah Winman, which is a story about a man, Ulysses, who is in Italy during the Second World War and meets someone who is helping to find the correct home for artworks that have been stolen by the Nazis, and meets a woman who tells him to go to Florence because it will change his life, and it turns out she was right. He goes back to the pub in East London where he grew up, and there are a ragtag group of friends, including a very talkative parrot and his wife. And one day he gets the chance to return to Florence permanently. And it is such a beautiful story of found family that is really wonderful and warming. It is quirky without being annoying. At least I didn't find it annoying. It is not too twee. It is not saccharine, which is something that I struggle with in books like this. I found it to be a great exploration. Winnie! Grief and love and loss and what it means to be a family, and also the vagaries of chance and fate. And it will definitely make you want to visit Venice, and hopefully make you feel summery feelings as well on a day like this. Also, of course, rereads are always really comforting. For me, I often reread Jane Austen when I'm feeling in the need for something. Well, it's a bit of a hug and also quite sharp and direct. You know what's coming and you know the story, but her wit and humour definitely, you get drawn into the Regency world, but it is not without smarts, which I think is something that I need in my hug books. They need to be a little sharper than just soft and cosy, but I definitely think there is something nostalgic about them. Having read them when I was a child, them being so in the world, that you know all the stories, you know all the beats, but they can still make you laugh. The next question is actually a personal one. What does your day job entail, and is it a good fit for you? I work for a trade union. I don't think I'm allowed to tell you which trade union. There was definitely something about what I speak about on the internet in relation to my job, so I won't give you too much detail, but I work for a trade union. I do financing and admin stuff and organising. It is a good fit for me. I have always believed in workers' rights and been very pro-union, and I think that helping to support people in this Tory capitalist hellscape in which I live is quite a good thing. I'm glad I'm to be doing something that is helpful like that, and I am also, although I'm not a very tidy person, I'm an exceptionally organised person in terms of like being digitally organised, know what's happening next, and making sure everybody has everything, having a good memory. That's kind of where my skill set lies. I am good at like getting all the ducks in a row and making sure everything goes through as it should, and I've also become much better at bothering other people who are less organised than I am and less on the ball about that sort of thing specifically. So I guess being organised, doing organising help is something that I'm good at, and trade union work is something that I believe in, so it is a good fit for me in that sense. Someone asked for historical mystery books, and I don't read a huge amount of historical mystery. I don't read a huge amount of historical fiction anymore, actually. If you like a political thriller type mystery, A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James is historical fiction set in Jamaica in the 1970s and 80s, and also in Miami and New York in the 90s. And it definitely has political thriller intrigue, like CIA plots, and the drug industry and the underground in relation to that, and how it relates to Jamaican politics. There's definitely some elements of mystery, definitely more thriller, I guess, rather than cozy mystery, if that's more what you were looking for. But if you are into political thriller, I think that, for me, Brief History of 7 Killings is one of the best I've ever read. I love Marlon James's writing. It is so, like, it is a difficult read, it is a brutal read, there are definitely more than 7 killings in it, but it is just so like immediate and so intense and so evocative. It really brings the places that he's talking about to light, and he does great character work as well. It's a literary ghost story, which I love, and I just think it's brilliant work. Definitely not cozy mystery though, if that's what you were looking for. The Fraud by Zadie Smith isn't exactly a historical mystery, but it is historical crime there is a fraud at the centre of it. If you're into like courtroom drama, then I think that would work. It is about 3 people in the Victorian period. A woman who is the cousin of a well-known writer who was moving in famous circles, but they are now down on their luck, and she and her cousin's new wife, who is working class, become obsessed with this trial of a fraud trial of a man who is claiming to be the lost heir to a fortune, but is potentially just a butcher from Essex. And the man who is vouching for him is the valet or butler. He is a black man who was enslaved, who works as a servant for the family now, and we hear about his past in Jamaica as an enslaved person as well. And if you are into, there is definitely a lot about the court, and it is based on a real life story. So if you are into courtroom drama, then I definitely think that one would work. I don't know if I have any actual historical mysteries that I've read, so those are my best responses. Someone asks for ghosts, please, and as I've mentioned, I love literary ghost stories, so I will leave a link in the above to all of my favourite literary ghost stories that I have read. Wolf Hall has ghosts. I love the way that Mantell uses ghosts. She uses ghosts all the time, actually. In Beyond Black, which I read more recently, is much more clearly a ghost story. It is set in the commuter towns in London about a medium who is kind of dealing with the ghosts of her past as well as ghosts of other people that she talks to, and she moves through the circuit of mediums, and there are all these other mediums and medium politics, and it is a lot about trauma and growing up working class in Britain and criminal underground again, and it is a dark book but has Mantell's signature wit. It is perhaps the funniest of her books, and she's just such a great writer. Like, just the best writer. Northwoods by Daniel Mason is the history of a house in the New England. It is the history of the dwelling from when it was built, like right in the foundation of America times, through to the modern day, and it is told in a really wonderful style with almost a series of vignettes about different people who live in this house, and each is told in a style appropriate to the time period. There are gay Victorian lovers, there is a kind of late Victorian sex comedy that involves a medium, and there are ghosts that reverberate throughout, and these are ghosts of the past of the house, but also of the past of America, the ghosts of slavery and of the genocide that's founded the country. And it is really wonderfully well written and really clever, and and the ghosts do come back to haunt us throughout the course of the book. Someone said, I would love to read a novel about exploration that's not action adventure but more character driven and well written, with a focus on actual discovery, learning, scientific enhancement. There are 2 books I can think of for this. The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, which I absolutely love. It is historical fiction set in Essex, obviously, about a woman who has just lost her husband, and she goes to Essex in search of this Essex serpent. It is around the time of the discovery of fossils and this idea that there might be living fossils, kind of like Loch Ness Monster vibes, and she goes and she stays in this small Essex town and enters into a strange kind of infatuation relationship with the local vicar. So there is kind of science versus religion thing. She is also being pursued by a doctor who is a surgeon, and there is a lot about like the advances in medical science at the time, and so it definitely has science in it, and it also is just wonderfully written, and is looking at, like I said, the clash between science and religion, but also folk tales, folk belief, and this kind of really interesting time period in terms of scientific discovery where people started to believe that anything could be real, kind of that like Arthur Conan Doyle and fairies vibe, and I think it's just really great character work, really enthralling, really propulsive read. I would also recommend Washington Black by Essie Ediguyan, which is about a young boy who is enslaved on a Caribbean island in the 17th or was it 18th century? I can't remember, but he meets this guy who is the brother of the slave owner, who is obsessed with making flying machines, and he ends up escaping from the island. Apologies, my camera died, but I am back. So he ends up escaping from the island and travelling across America and Canada and into various different countries on the trail of freedom, trying to become free, but also there are elements of that scientific discovery that you are interested in, both through this man with his flying machines lines, but also this kind of exploration idea. And then also like our main character, Washington Black, is an artist, an illustrator. He becomes a scientific illustrator, and that leads into like botany, zoology kind of illustrations going on, and the idea of like museums and knowledge and scientific knowledge, who gets to keep that, the perspective of that. And I think that would definitely, if that's your interest in sort of scientific discovery, and the age of discovery, I guess, is that quite this age? Anyway, the Enlightenment idea of discovery and science, I definitely think that that one would be good if that's something you're interested in. Someone asked for a slump breaker. I typically like slower literary fiction, but I just can't seem to get into anything lately. Something that can't be put down. So for me, when I have been feeling fairly slumpy lately, and for me, some of the things that break a slump for me are short books. I think definitely that sense of accomplishment, that you are getting through your short book, those can help with that feeling. And some of the ones that I love include Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, which is about a woman whose wife went on a submarine expedition and came back changed, and she is like always in the bath and wants to drink salt water, and it is the idea of loss and the end of a relationship, loss before a loss has happened, and the way that it explores grief and love and changing relationships, I think, is really interesting. And it is so beautifully written. It is a horror book, so there are some sort of creepy body horror elements to it, but I think it's just so lush and lovely. And so it is short, which means you feel like you're getting through it quicker, but for me also, I found it propulsive. Similarly, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima is another short book, this time a classic. Both of these, because you like slow literary fiction, I think they might work for you, particularly if you like them on the more weird, disturbing end. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea is about a group of boys in the 1950s in Japan who become obsessed with this sailor because they think that life is not worth living, and they know the secrets of life. That society is just a pretense, that we put a facade that people put on to hide their essentially brutal natures, and they become obsessed with this sailor, and those ideas of brutality and the essential human nature get pushed to their furthest extent. Well, not quite their furthest, but pretty brutal. And I think it is just such a compelling book, one of those books that feels really hard to put down, because you want to know what's going to happen next, and yet is still an interesting, engaging idea, exploring human psychology. And I think wonderful, really great read. Another thing that I find for me breaks a slump is the opposite, is giant books. I think a really engaging, compelling giant book can really sweep you along and get you sucked into the story, and I think this particularly works on audiobook. And for me, one of my favourites of those in recent times is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which is a retelling of David Copperfield from the perspective of a boy in Appalachia in the 90s and early 2000s, looks at poverty and the medical system in America and how that keeps people in poverty, the opioid crisis. Looks also at classism and the way that people look down on people in poverty in Appalachia especially, and I just found it so incredibly engaging and moving and wonderful, the way it looks at found family and hope through those difficult times, and the way that people band together, and the way it talks about politics, I think was great. But it is so voicey, and the characters are just so really wonderful, engaging, really fully fleshed out. I think it's just such a wonderful read. So I definitely think that both those extremes. The next question is, are there any new releases that you are excited about? I of course have a whole video of my spring new releases, but there are four books that I have recently requested physical proof copies of, which I don't normally do because I'm very bad at reading proofs. But these four I'm so excited about that I really, really wanted them for myself. Where did I put my phone? So the first one is Private Rights by Julia Armfield. I just mentioned Our Wives Under the Sea, and Private Rights is also obviously by her, and it is set in a futuristic world where the water has come up to the sea, but it's about these three sisters. The sea has come up over the land, and it's about these three sisters who have lost their father. So again, it's about grief and loss and family relationships, but set in a water world. I just think that Julia Armfield's going to be really good at writing that. Then there is also We Do Not Part by Han Kang. I really loved The Vegetarian, although I haven't read any of Han Kang's other works, and I know several of them have been translated, but this one's a new one, and it's coming out next year, so I probably went a bit early with my request for a proof of that. This is about a woman who receives a message from her friend saying that she has been hospitalised in Seoul, asking her to join her. When they last saw each other over a year before, the woman who has been hospitalised had to leave behind her pet bird, and she begs her friend to take the plane to save the animal. But a snowstorm hits the island. She must reach the house at all costs, but slow and wind slows her down. And I just loved the way Han Kang explored social ideas about like society and treatment of people who are different and women, and the way that she writes was just so beautiful. So definitely want to read this one. There is also A Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez. I read what is it? Our Share of Night, part of the Big Book Club. I will leave the live show linked in the cards above. I read that with Nathan's Nook, but I have loved Mariana Enriquez's short stories way more than that novel, and this is a new collection of short stories. Mariana Enriquez writes kind of urban horror, kind of a low-key monster body horror stuff, set particularly in Buenos Aires, dealing with the politics of Argentina, and I think it will be a really interesting read. Argentina had a very interesting election at the end of last year. I wonder if any of that will be included. And then the final one, obviously, Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I have a video on Normal People up on this channel. I have read Beautiful World, Where Are You, which I found interesting but didn't love as much as Normal People. But everyone is out to read the new Sally Rooney, so I doubt I will get a proof of this one. But I have requested one, and it is about two brothers who seem to have little in common. Peter is a lawyer in his 30s, but in the wake of his father's death, he is medicating himself to sleep and struggling to manage his relationships with two women. Ivan is a competitive chess player, a socially awkward loner. Now, in the early weeks of bereavement, he meets an older woman emerging from her own turbulent past. So again, we are talking about grief and loss, and family relationships, and I'm interested to see where Sally Rooney takes this. It sounds like it's a bit different from some of her other books, but maybe it won't be. Maybe it will be very similar. Next one is I'm looking for a book set in rural, preferably European place, focused on characters, no matter the time period. And the first thing that jumped into my head was A Study of Obedience, which is a very strange book, and it's not for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. It is about a woman who travels to her family's place of origin, where her brother has set up and he's living there, but her family were forced to flee. It's kind of intimated because of the Holocaust, and it is about the family's relationships in the past, her strange relationships with her brother in particular, and also the kind of feeling of hostility from this small town. And it's written in a really strange way. It's kind of a weird little book, but I definitely enjoyed it. Another one that's a bit more like plotty and a bit more has wider appeal, and is set in a rural place is The Mercies by Kiran Millwood Hargrave, which is set on a small island off the north coast of Norway called Finnmark, and this is a place where all of the men have recently died in a fishing accident, and it has means the women have to be like self-sufficient and live for themselves, and so they are trying to do that, and like the different personalities and things, and then also the King of Denmark, who runs Norway at the time, is sending out witchfinders to try and rid the place of the scourge of witchcraft, and it is also like anti-Sami kind of action. And so a witchfinder comes to this town where women are living on their own, and bringing with him his new wife, and it definitely has like that personal relationships, and it is set in this very rural, very isolated, very cold place where all of these people have to get on together, and there is like the fear of the environment, the roughness of the nature in which they are living, and I definitely think if you are into isolated places, this is a great one for that. Then we have, I would love a book rec on female friendship, but the female friends are weird as heck, and maybe there's something a bit about writing, something sinister, or somehow something sexy going on in the book as well, which I think sounds to me like Big Swiss, which I don't know if you've read that. It's not really about female friendship, but it's definitely about female relationship. It's about a woman who is a transcriber for a sex therapist, and so she listens to the stories of all of these people coming to the therapy session, and she becomes obsessed with this one woman who's she calls Big Swiss, and then she happens to meet her in real life, and forms a relationship with her without the woman knowing that she has been transcribing it. And she is definitely weird and sinister, and there is sexy stuff going on in this too. It is like a bizarre sex comedy horror, almost like an interpersonal horror. She's a terrible person. You definitely have to not liking characters has to not be important to you in order to enjoy this book, but it's definitely weird. Beyond Black, which I mentioned earlier by Hilary Mantel, also has female friendship, a kind of antagonistic, weird female friendship at the centre of it. Nothing about writing, but it is quite a dark, weird little book. I do have a whole video, and I do have a whole video of books about female friendship, which I will leave linked in the cards above if you want to go and explore further, because I'm having trouble thinking of things off the top of my head. And then the final one is a book with an isolating setting that has to do with the character figuring themselves out in their 20s, but somehow the lost and lonely elements of the book are redeemed by coziness and some humour. That is so specific, so specific. I feel like you have a book in mind. I have mentioned isolated books, but none of them, and I guess the Mercies is kind of about women figuring themselves out in the 20s, in their 20s. Braised Pork by Anne Yu, she does go to Tibet in that, so that's definitely an isolated rural community. It is about a woman whose husband has died, and when he died he left a picture of a half fish, half man, not like traditional mermaid, it was like fish head, man bottom, next to him on the bath, and she becomes kind of obsessed with that. And she might be in her 20s, she might be in her 30s, I can't quite remember. I don't think her age is important, but it is about feeling isolated and lonely and not knowing what to do with your life in Beijing. But then also, as I said, she travelled to Tibet because her husband had gone to Tibet before he died, and it has kind of magical, weird, uncomfortable. I wouldn't say it was cozy, I would say it was strange and uncomfortable, but I would say there was a sense of humour. If you like kind of strange, weird, off the wall sense of humour, then it does have that. I would say that Big Swiss and Beyond Black are much funnier though, if you are definitely looking for a sense of humour. But yeah, none of those three are cosy. Maybe you should recommend me some cosy books in the comments down below, since I seem to be completely at a loss to think of any books that are cosy. Those are all the questions and recommendations I had. If you have any further books you want me to recommend or any further questions for me, do leave them in the comments down below. If you are new here, my name is Roisin. I put out new videos twice a week, so I will see you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!